Hello everyone, welcome back. Happy Sunday, or whatever day you're watching this. I'm currently in the middle of finishing a couple different videos, whether a reading vlog for this Nabokov book I'm reading, Letters to a Young Poet. I've got a couple different things going on, but I figured I would put a video out now, kind of going over everything I'm going to be reading this semester, just so that you all can kind of see what's coming up on my reading list, as well as, I don't know, maybe some information for anyone who's looking to major in English or creative writing specifically, which is what I'm doing. But I take a lot of English courses, even ones that maybe aren't required for the creative writing track I'm on. So I think I'm kind of a good mix of both. But yeah, so I'm going to start off with the Russian literature course I'm in, which is 19th century Russian lit. I took 20th century last year, which was like Master and Margarita, Invitation to a Beheading, a couple different novels. But I think I have more reading for the 19th century course. So starting off, we're reading A Hero of Our Time by Mikhail Lermontov. This is actually apparently the first Russian novel of the 19th century, one that I don't think most people hear about. I certainly had never heard about it. The man who wrote it, Lermontov, died at 26 in a duel, much like his hero Pushkin, and I guess never got to kind of reach the pinnacle of his writing career. But this is a really well done book. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm gonna talk about it once I finish it. We're maybe halfway through, but it's kind of told from this perspective, this unnamed man who's kind of hearing this story about this guy named Pechorin, and you're kind of seeing all this unfold, and you're not really sure who the main character is, and then you kind of get to the second part, and Pechorin is now the narrator. It's interesting. It definitely toys around with the themes of being like that kind of rebel, that like wanderer. But like the guy seems kind of like an awful person in certain people's eyes. So it's a very interesting book so far. I definitely can't wait to get to that. Then we're reading Pushkin. Evgeny Onegin, I think is how you say the title. But this is obviously his most famous work, a novel in verse. Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to read this. I don't read a ton of poetry. I am this semester, but this certainly feels a little different from like modern poetry, let's say. So I'm excited to get to this. I've looked through it and heard a lot of good things, but yeah, so that'll be fun. I think that's the next one we're reading. Then I've got, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is obviously the one I'm most excited for. I have wanted to read this for a while and just haven't carved out the time for a 550-page Dostoevsky novel. But yeah, this one's going to be awesome. I can't wait to read this. It is a murder story told from a murderer's point of view that implicates even the most innocent reader in its enormities. I've read some Dostoevsky before, but never Crime and Punishment. So very excited for that one. Then I've got Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, and Other Stories. So I have read The Death of Ivan Ilyich. The review is up on this channel. I loved it. But this is a bunch of other stories. I can't remember which ones we're reading outside of this. I think Master and Man was in here. I'm sure The Prisoner of the Caucasus. Oh, I love Alyosha the Pot. I have read that one before. That's very short, but I like that one a lot. So I'm super excited for this as well. Some authors that I love, but just don't always set aside the time to read. And once you get into a class and you're forced to do this massive amount of reading, it's kind of nice in a way because it is stuff I want to do. Yeah, I don't know. So then I've got City Folk and Country Folk by Sophia. I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but that is her name. I don't know if I can get it. Yeah, that's her name. An unsung gem of 19th century Russian literature, City Folk and Country Folk is a seemingly gentle yet devastating satire of Russia's aristocratic and pseudo-intellectual elites in the 1860s. Sophia, writing under a male pseudonym, centers her story on a common-sense, hard-working noblewoman and her self-assured daughter living on their small rural estate, in a tale of manipulation, infatuation, and female assertiveness. Yeah, so I'm excited for this as well. I had never heard of this one either, but the professor made it sound really good, so I'm excited for that. And then Gogol, The Collected Tales of Nikolai Gogol. I really have not read him. I read The Nose, I believe, when I read George Saunders's A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which he talks about a bunch of different Russian short stories, but this is someone who is clearly a very unique writer in terms of his style, and someone I just really haven't read a lot of. So I can't wait to get to this. Yeah, The Overcoat I've heard good things about. Paved the way for Dostoevsky and Kafka. Yeah, so that's 6 novels in all, I believe, for that class. And then I have another 6 for my author-centered course, which is on Vladimir Nabokov. The first one we're reading is Illusion Defense. I'm actually filming a reading vlog for this right now because I just love it so much and kind of want to dedicate an entire video to it. Hopefully that's not the case with all these books. I mean, I don't even think, like, Illusion Defense isn't even his biggest novel, right? I mean, Pale Fire is huge. This is supposed to be great. Can't wait to read that one. Lolita, obviously. The copy of Lolita we're reading is an annotated copy, which is interesting. I'm not really sure. It assiduously glosses Lolita's extravagant wordplay and its frequent literary allusions, parodies, and cross-references. There's obviously a lot of controversy surrounding this book. I'm not sure if I'll talk about it. I probably will, but I don't even really know all the context and kind of, I'm sure my teacher will do a good job of kind of giving us the context and how to talk about it in the right way. She has been just a fantastic lecturer. I'm enjoying this class the most by far out of all my classes. I mean, I always enjoy my workshops and whatnot, so I like writing and everything, but getting to read him and then hearing these lectures where she really goes into detail, almost like making sure you understand what's happening in the book, but diving into ideas like while doing that. So it's really cool because I know that some of these can probably be confusing. Speaking of which, Invitation to a Beheading, I've read before. Did not love this one. Maybe I'll feel differently, but my teacher did kind of say that this is the only one we're reading that's kind of a poor translation done by his son. And I wouldn't know, obviously, but I definitely can tell that the writing is much better in Illusion Defense so far. And then Despair, which we're reading next. This one's supposed to be really interesting. I think he's tying in kind of like this guy who's a bad artist and also a bad criminal. He has a lot of ideas within his novels about bad art being responsible for kind of the world's faults. It's very, very interesting. Like, someone who's not a good artist is not a good person in his mind, it seems like. He has a lot of very interesting ideas that I'm excited to dive more into, and a lot of those are present in Illusion Defense, and that video will be coming out maybe in a week or so. I'm not quite done with that yet. And then Nin, I'm not actually sure how you say that. A professor of Russian at an American college who takes the wrong train to deliver a lecture in a language he cannot master. Pinin is a tireless lover who writes to his treacherous lives. A genius needs to keep so much in store and thus cannot offer you the whole of himself as I do. All of his books, like, I don't think you get a ton out of all the descriptions because he is so calculated, so intentional in the way he writes, putting so much together, and that really it's confusing, but it's extraordinary when you have to sit down at a desk, and this isn't like a nighttime read, although I lied, I have read it at night, but I really like to underline, annotate these books specifically. I don't always love to do that, but it really helps me to kind of grasp what's going on. And I have 2 12-page essays for this class, which I guess is okay because it's only 2. I usually have more essays, but there's some shorter ones, and 12 is usually just the length of the final. But yeah, I'm excited to write about these a little bit. I do have a lot of writing this semester, whether it's for the 19th century lit, the Nabokov class. My professor for my fiction workshop is having us write 1,500 words of fiction a week, which is something that they don't usually have those kinds of requirements. But I really enjoy it because the biggest thing for me is when I'm writing, I'm just like, this sucks, I want to stop, and I will just quit on a story oftentimes if it doesn't feel perfect after 2 pages. And that's not, in my mind, I know that's wrong to do, but I just can't. I need to be forced to write basically a lot of the time. Not that I don't enjoy it, but it just really helps to like be told you have to get these words on the page and then going back and revising as much as you want. And really anything, if you just get a story out, you can make it good through revision, or at least much better than it is. And so I'm enjoying that a lot. And in those courses, or in that course, we're reading a lot of George Saunders, Z.Z. Packer, Edward P. Jones, probably Flannery O'Connor. I forget, maybe Laurie Moore's in there. Just a bunch of really great short story writers that I'm excited to get to. But I probably won't be reviewing much of them. I'll maybe talk about some of my favorites, but I mean, again, they're not full books. It's kind of just excerpts throughout the week. And then I'm taking a Gwendolyn Brooks course, a poet from the south side of Chicago, with a fantastic teacher who is a poet as well, and he's been great so far. We went to not the same high school, but Chicago high school systems are hard to explain, but we went to similar situated public schools, and so we've talked a lot about Chicago so far. I mean, a lot of her writing really infuses location, kind of like Edward P. Jones did in that collection I just reviewed with Washington. So that's been really interesting. I don't tend to read biographies, but this is A Surprised Queenhood and the New Black Sun, The Life and Legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks. We just started this. It's really interesting. I didn't know she was such a prodigy in terms of writing poems from the time. I think they said she had a nationally published poem at 13. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I mean, and obviously the first African American to win the Pulitzer Prize, not just woman, but in general, and to win the Pulitzer Prize in poetry as an African American in 1949, an African American woman is very impressive and a huge deal for the writing community at that time. And I've just started reading her poetry. I've read like We Real Cool, you know, that kind of thing, some of her more popular works in middle school, but this is called Blacks by Gwendolyn Brooks. It's a bunch of collections in one. Like Annie Allen is what we're reading right now, which is the collection that won her the Pulitzer, but there's a bunch of different sections in here. So it's the closest thing to like a full collection of all her poems. It's not all of them, but it's a lot. I don't know how many pages, 500 pages worth of poems. And it's been great so far. I mean, she's really interesting. I will definitely want to talk about some of these poems, which I don't think I've talked about any poetry yet, but I do have this. I do have some other poetry collections that I wanted to get to. This was recommended to me, Louise Gluck, Dennis Smith. I have like Mary Oliver somewhere, so I'm definitely trying to get more into poetry a little bit, not necessarily because I want to like write it or anything, although I mean I do like writing songs and poems and stuff, but also I think it's just a cool thing to have on the side because I'm not going to be able to read a ton of my own books that I'm choosing to read, especially if they're longer novels. So it's kind of a nice thing to get into, I think. Oh, and this is a collection of African American poetry. It's called 250 Years of Struggle and Song, edited by Kevin Young, I believe. It's a pretty cool cover, one of those like old school kind of books, but it's very recently done because it's divided into sections. So it starts off with Section 1, Bury Me in a Free Land, which is work from 1770 to 1899. Section 2, Lift Every Voice, 1900 to 1918. Section 3, The Dark Tower, 1919 to 1936. Section 4, The Ballads of Remembrance, 1936 to 59. Section 5, Ideas of Ancestry, 1959 to 75. And then Section 6 is 76 to 89. Section 7 is 90 to 2008. Section 8 is 2009 to 2020. So yeah, very recent. And so Gwendolyn Brooks is in here a bunch, but people like Langston Hughes. So yeah, Gwendolyn Brooks is in here a bunch, but people like Langston Hughes, Phyllis Wheatley. I really like how it's organized by like time period and you're kind of tracing certain ideas, which he explained in the introduction, which I just read. I haven't read any of the poetry yet. There's just a long intro that we had to read for class. So that's those 3 books for Gwendolyn Brooks. And then this, Seasons, which I actually don't know anything about because we haven't started, but it's called The Gwendolyn Brooks Experience. And so there's illustrations, there's poems. It looks interesting. So yeah, I don't really know what's going on with that, but I'm excited to read it. I think this class is going to be a lot of fun. Not as many papers for that class. This is more of it always depends on the teacher, but this is more of we have to like recite some poems. We have to take some exams in person, which are basically essays, but instead of like having all this time to do it, you kind of got to go in and write for a full class period. So yeah, I mean, I think that's all. I'm taking those 3 classes. I'm taking my workshop. I am taking an environmental science course just for some last social science credits I need. And that's whatever. I never tend to enjoy those kinds of courses, not necessarily because of the content, but it's just that format of class I don't love. And yeah, I'm just not a huge fan. So, but the English courses have been awesome so far. I'm really excited to get to a lot of these, make some more videos soon. And yeah, thank you guys again for watching as always, and hope to see you soon with either the video on the Lucian defense or Letters to a Young Poet.